Welcome to Policy on Demand. I'm Sindhu Blume.
And I'm Scott McCandless. It is the week of February 17th, and this is your Monday briefing. The House is out this week for the President's Day recess, and the Senate is in starting tomorrow. And on the Senate's radar, voting on the FY 2025 budget resolution approved by the Budget Committee last week.
We're going to talk about what's ahead for the budget resolution in a minute, but first, two updates. News reports over the weekend indicated that IRS employees could be laid off this week following the dismissal of thousands of federal workers under the direction of the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE. We are closely following these developments as well as their impact.
And the IRS has issued final Form 6765, credit for increasing research activities. For companies reporting R&D information, this form is a heavy lift. There's a significant increase in the amount of information taxpayers will need to disclose, as well as mandatory disclosures for 2025 that were optional in 2024. A link to the form and our conversation from December with details about the form are in the description of this episode. And now joining us to talk about what to expect on budget talks and tax legislation is Mark Prater. Mark, welcome.
Thanks, Scott. Sindhu, pleasure to be here this morning.
I see you brought your extensive notes just like a good budgeteer would, and that's just where we want to start with the budget. Both the House and Senate have begun their budget processes, but they're very divergent, very different. So can you talk a little bit about, first of all, why we even need to go through this to unlock tax cuts, but then what the House path looks like and what the Senate path looks like?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. It really is the tale of two budget resolutions, very different in scope, strategy, et cetera, and frankly, mirroring the strategy as laid out by the leadership in the House and the leadership in the Senate. So let's go to the Senate budget resolution first. That was the one first approved. Sure. And that resolution really carries out the two bill strategy, two resolution strategy. So in the first one, you see money, significant funds set aside for border security and defense. You see a tranche of funds that are anticipated coming in for energy exploration and more leasing, et cetera. And then some other committees with some minor floors for contributing to deficit reduction. That's pretty consistent with what the Senate's been telling us. So that's the Senate resolution. As you said, it got through committee, a party line vote. We're willing to see if Leader Thune is going to put it on the floor. In the House, very different story. Again, consistent with what the House leadership has been talking about, which is a one bill, one big beautiful bill strategy that would include a lot of things. The issues that I just discussed, money for border, money for defense, money for other issues, but also an accommodation for a significant tax cut package. And then a lot of deficit reduction, much higher numbers on the deficit reduction, such as $880 billion to the Energy and Commerce Committee, for instance. So that bill that's contemplated would be one bill covering all of these fiscal issues. And as you said, necessary, the budget resolution is necessary to unlock the authority to do that bill.
All right, could you get into the impact on tax cuts if Congress can't hit the targets that it needs to hit?
So Sindhu, a really kind of unique mechanism is in the House budget resolution. So it contemplates $4.5 trillion of tax relief, but it says if the House can't hit this $2 trillion target, then they're going to reduce that tax relief so that it could drop significantly. And so there's really kind of an incentive for the tax relief side to make the House more aggressive on the cut side.
At the top, we had mentioned the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. To what extent are the savings that DOGE seems to be identifying potential offsets for any of the things going on in the budget process, specifically for tax cuts? Can they be used to offset that? Are they real savings, or are they just things that have been identified that then Congress would need to act on? How do those all work together?
So, Scott, the key is to count for reconciliation purposes. The measures must be legislated. So, as you said, the DOGE has come up with suggestions, but to count, those suggestions would have to be legislated. This is the same with tariffs. Congress would have to legislate the tariffs for those to count. And in this case, it's really up to Congress if they want to find a path to tap into those savings and whether those savings would score, whether the Congressional Budget Office would score those savings. But it's relevant, but again, purely administrative actions will not result in legislative savings.
All right, why don't we close out with timing? Can you walk us through what that looks like for how things are going to play out?
So Sindhu, first of all, they need to get both resolutions off the floor. If Leader Thune goes through this and spends this week, and it'll be about a week to do it, because there's 50 hours on the budget resolution in the Senate, plus vote-a-rama and all of that, really usually consumes a big chunk of the week. So if the Senate processes it this week, then it will be a matter that the Senate has processed. The House is out this week. We'll be coming back next week. It's up to Speaker Johnson, Leader Scalise, whether they want to bring up that approved resolution, and they would take it through the House floor. The House does not require as much debate time or votes because the Rules Committee decides that. But then they would be looking to, well, how do they deal with the differences, as Scott discussed earlier, very big differences in the approach and strategy and the consequences of each of these resolutions. So they could do that through amendments to each of the resolutions, or they could go to a conference, and they would have to work out these big structural differences. And the Senate resolution contemplates a March 7th date for committees. The House resolution is late March. I think both of those dates, we'll see. The 7th looks like that probably wouldn't hold. But also keep in mind, come March 14th, the continuing resolution expires. Right. So all the spending, discretionary spending has to be dealt with. And that could complicate this process some. But we'll see. The key event to me is, what does the speaker say a week from now?
Right. Mark, that notebook in front of you speaks volumes. That's why we have you here to walk us through all these details. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sindhu. Scott.
And for our viewers, the latest Week in Review with Rohit Kumar is in the description of this episode, along with other recent episodes.
Also in the description, you'll find a link to our PwC Tax Insight on last week's Budget Committee action. We appreciate you spending this time with us and hope you have a good week. Take care.